Robert Waley-Cohen, owner of Long Run, thank you for joining us here on Betfred TV at a pretty grey Cheltenham. He won the race in 2011, but wasn't quite at his best last year. Do you think you have him back to top form this year?
Well, I sincerely hope so. I mean, obviously this is a question you should really ask the trainer rather than the owner, but everything's sort of absolutely heading in precisely the right direction. He went for a gallop at Kempton on Saturday. I didn't actually see him because I was in Ireland. We were running our Grand National Prospect Oscar time at Ferryhouse, so I didn't see him. So you've probably seen him more recently than I have, but he certainly seemed to be in very good order and worked 2 miles. We are going to school him again on Friday. I mean, he jumps most Fridays, to be fair, just goes up 10 fences. We're going to try cheekpieces on him to see if that what impact that has on him. Sam is saying, you know, he's very bright and cheery in the first half of the race. Sometimes when he thinks he's got the other horses beat in the latter part of the races, he starts to go a bit idle, and maybe they just keep him concentrating all the way to the end. In fairness, Sam said the year we beat Denman 7 lengths and Kauto Star behind that, in 2011 when we won the Gold Cup and we broke the track record, and Sam came in and said, horse was looking around the crowd and idling in front. He said, gosh, you can idle in front, beat Denman 7 lengths and beat the track record. What might you do if you actually galloped all the way to the line?
And of course, earlier this season, Sam gave the horse a brilliant ride in the King George, regained his King George title. How special a day was that for you and your family? And Sam, of course. Well,
I think that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, when he was a youngster, I mean, to be fair, he won the King George at sort of at the very beginning of the year when he was 6. He was born actually on April the 5th, so I know all horses have their birthday on January the 1st. He was actually a 5-year-old and on the clock, and then went and won the Gold Cup. That was fantastic. And then there were big question marks and justifiable question marks last year when he didn't win the King George and he didn't win the Gold Cup. So come back this year and say maybe he just took a lot out of him the year before, and they were taking on Kauto Star, who was probably the greatest horse of the last 50 years. I couldn't tell you whether it was Kauto Star was brilliant or we were just that very tiny fraction you need to be below your absolute best. He certainly came down a long way from the rating that the handicapper gave him after the Gold Cup in 2011. During 2012 and never ran to that rate at all, and hasn't yet run to that rate since. So, but I'm hoping that he's absolutely on song and ready to strut his stuff on March the 15th.
Were you worried that he might never come back to reach those levels again like he did early in the season when he landed the King George?
Well, you're a bit mystified, actually, to tell the truth, because I wasn't surprised that Kauto Star beat us in the chase at the Lancashire Chase at Haydock, because Kauto Star was absolutely prepped for the minute. He was on a comeback mission because he'd not run well before, and everyone was urging the connections to retire him. They had a real point to make, and they produced him trained to the minute. And to be fair, we weren't trained to the minute. Our target was the King George. Not winning the King George was a very big disappointment, no denying that. We were then delighted to win the Denman, again breaking the track record, and it looked like the horse was all set up for the Gold Cup and to go and do his stuff again. And frankly, he ran a not very good race. I mean, it sounds ridiculous when you come third in a race as competitive as the Gold Cup to say you didn't run a good race, but that's what it looked like. Sam produced him at exactly the right moment. He jumped but he never travelled quite as well in the race, and although he jumped the lead over the last, he just didn't bound up the hill like he had the year before. So that was a bit of a disappointment.
When he was a younger horse, you think about running in the Arkle or different or 2-mile races, you look like such a quick horse. Is that why you're thinking about putting the cheek pieces on as well, just to kind of liven him up a little bit?
Well, you've got to remember, around that time we were putting in earplugs to keep him calm because he was so buzzy. And we've taken those out this year. And I think it's just maturing and becoming a more sensible horse. I mean, physically he's matured a lot. I mean, the astonishing thing looking at him is he's now a really big, strapping 17-hand chaser and fully mature. For the first time we've ever seen him fully mature is this year. That to think that he actually won a Grade 1 3-year-old hurdle, which you think is absolutely astonishing idea for a horse. So he did have real toe, but that was, it has to be said, was 2 mile 2. Yeah. And the only time he's run less than 2 mile 2 was in the Kingmaker, which was a Grade 2 chase at Warwick, which he ran in before he came here for his novice race. He'd been on a very go, and that really convinced us that the Arkle was not the right race for him. He ought to go for the RSA. In those days, there wasn't the equivalent of the 2 mile 5 novice chase, so it was 2 or 3. Yeah. Anyhow, he went for the 3. He again came third. I have to say, he looked as though that was pretty much near the end of a very long season. He'd come over from France at the end of a pretty tough 4-year-old career, where he'd won a Grade 1 4-year-old, 2 Grade 1 4-year-old chases, one in England and one at Kempton on Boxing Day. So by the time he got to the festival, I think Nicky Henderson's view was he was probably had enough for that season.
You mentioned he maybe had too long a season last year. Do you think the fact he'll be a fresher horse, is that more in his favour?
Well, I don't know it's necessarily more in his favour. I mean, I wouldn't have been averse to running him in the Denman if it hadn't been so incredibly heavy. I mean, there are only 2 races for 3-mile chases of his calibre between the King George and the Gold Cup. One is here at the Argento on January the 26th, when the ground was so heavy that we had to omit a fence. And the next one is a week later at Newbury in the Denman Chase, where I decided not to enter because the ground was at the time of entry very heavy, and the forecast was a bit unsettled. And you say, well, if it keeps on raining, it's going to be very heavy. If it stops raining, it's going to be like a glue pot. Well, it probably wasn't quite as extreme as either of those, because it rained a bit but not too much. But it was still run on heavy ground, and I don't regret at all not going there, because our focus of the season, every season, is to win the King George and the Cheltenham Gold Cup. And leaving the race at Newbury is not how you win the Cheltenham Gold Cup.
And the fact the ground's drying out all the time, hopefully the weather's going to stay fairly dry in the run-up to the festival. You must be pretty excited about getting back on some decent ground, and maybe that might bring a bit more of the old long run out, I should say.
Well, I'd love it to be run on good soft, or good soft in places, or something around that. Good soft would be ideal. It's fair for everybody, and there should be no excuses on the basis of the ground didn't suit.
And finally, you've mentioned numerous big days you've had with the horse, great days out he's given you, but how special would it be to win a second Betfred Gold Cup this year? Oh,
it'd be absolutely wonderful. I mean, there's only one horse has ever regained their crown, having lost it, and that's Kauto Star. We gained it unbelievably young, the youngest horse since Mill House back in the early 60s. It'd be great to come back and win it again, and to win the most important championship race in National Hunt Racing at Cheltenham in the Gold Cup with my son Sam riding would just be fantastic.